The Galactic Defense Academy floated in the dark space between three dying stars. The massive station looked like a metal mountain with lights scattered across its surface like tiny diamonds. Ships came and went from its docking bays every hour. Inside those ships were the strongest and smartest beings from across the galaxy. Li Huan pressed his face against the small window of the transport ship. He had never seen anything so huge in his entire life. The academy was 10 times bigger than the space station above his home planet. His hands were sweating as he watched the giant structure grow larger and larger. "First time seeing Nexus Prime?" asked the pilot. She was a green-skinned alien with 4 eyes. Her voice sounded like music when she spoke. "Yes, ma'am," Huan replied. He tried to sound calm, but his voice shook a little. "It's much bigger than I expected," the pilot laughed. "Wait until you see the inside. I've been flying cadets here for 20 years. Most of them look just like you do right now, scared and excited at the same time." Huan nodded. He was definitely both of those things. Back on his farm world, he had been the smartest student in his school. His teachers said he was special. They said he could solve problems that made other students give up. But now he was going to be surrounded by the best fighters and thinkers from hundreds of different worlds. The docking bay opened like a giant mouth. Their ship slipped inside and landed with a soft bump. Huan grabbed his small bag and followed the other passengers out. The air inside the station tasted different. It was clean but had a metallic flavor that made his nose tickle. A tall alien wearing a dark blue uniform waited for them. She had 4 arms and skin that looked like it was made of purple crystals. Her face was long and narrow with bright yellow eyes. When she moved, her crystal skin caught the light and sparkled. "New cadets, form a line," she commanded. Her voice was deep and strong. "I am Instructor Vexithara. You will address me as instructor or ma'am, nothing else." Huan quickly got in line with the other new students. There was a huge gray alien that looked like a walking rock. Next to him stood a thin blue creature with tentacles instead of arms. Behind Huan was something that looked like a giant insect but wore clothes and carried books. "Look at them," whispered the insect alien to its friend. "So many different species, the galaxy keeps getting stranger every year." Instructor Vexithara walked down the line. She stopped in front of each cadet and looked them up and down. When she reached Huan, she paused for a long time. Her yellow eyes studied him like he was a puzzle she was trying to solve. "Human," she said finally. "From the Sol system." "Yes, ma'am," Huan replied. He stood as straight as he could. "How old are you, human?" 19 standard years, ma'am." Vexthara made a sound that might have been laughter. 19. Most species here have been training for war since before you were born. What makes you think you belong in this academy?" Huan felt his face get hot. All the other cadets were staring at him now. "I want to learn, ma'am. I want to help protect the galaxy." "Wanting and doing are very different things," Vexithara said. She moved on to the next cadet. After inspection, they were led through long metal hallways. The walls were covered with pictures of famous battles and heroes from across the galaxy. Huan recognized some of them from his history books. Others were completely new to him. "The Academy has been training the galaxy's best defenders for 300 years, Vexthara explained as they walked. "Every species that joins the Galactic Union sends their finest young warriors here. They learn strategy, combat, leadership, and survival." They passed through a massive dining hall. Hundreds of cadets from dozens of different worlds sat at long tables. Some were eating food that looked normal. Others were consuming things that glowed or moved or made strange sounds. "Meals are served 4 times per day," Vexithara continued. "The food processors can create anything your species needs to survive. Try not to stare at what others are eating. It's considered rude." The insect alien raised one of its many arms. "Instructor, what about the Void Breaker course? When do we get to attempt it?" Vexthara stopped walking. A smile spread across her crystal face, but it was not a kind smile. "Eager to fail, are we? The Void Breaker is not for first-year cadets, it is the Academy's final test. Most students spend 4 years preparing for it." "But some attempt it earlier, correct?" asked the gray rock alien. "Some do," Vexthara agreed. and some die trying. The Void Breaker has broken more promising careers than any other challenge in the Academy. It is a combat simulation unlike anything you have ever faced. You command a damaged warship deep in enemy territory. Your crew is dying. Your weapons are failing. Enemy fighters are closing in for the kill. She turned to face the group. The current record holder is Cadet Rix Moeller from the Gornathian Empire. He completed the course in 4 hours and 23 minutes. Before him, no one had ever finished in less than 6 hours. Juan listened carefully. A combat simulation sounded like a very complicated video game. Back home, he had been good at games that required planning and quick thinking. But this was probably much harder than anything he had ever tried. "What happens if someone fails?" asked the blue tentacle alien. "Failure means different things to different cadets," Vexthara replied. "Some simply cannot complete the course. They are given other assignments that match their abilities. Others push too hard and suffer mental trauma from the experience. The simulation feels completely real. When your virtual crew dies, you feel responsible. When your ship explodes, you experience the fear and pain of death." The group fell silent. Juan could feel the other cadets becoming nervous around him. He was nervous too, but also curious. How realistic could a simulation really be? And what made it so difficult that trained warriors from across the galaxy struggled with it? They reached the dormitory level. Each cadet would share a room with someone from a different species. This was supposed to help them learn about each other and work together. Juan's roommate turned out to be a large, furry creature that smelled like cinnamon and spoke in a language of musical whistles. "Tomorrow you begin basic training," Vexthara announced. "Get rest, eat well. In 6 months we will see who among you has what it takes to be a defender of the galaxy." As the group dispersed, Juan overheard 2 instructors talking quietly near the elevator. "The human looks so young," one said, "almost fragile." "Humans are new to galactic warfare," replied the other. "They will learn their limitations quickly enough." Juan pretended not to hear them. He had been underestimated before. Teachers, classmates, and even his own family sometimes forgot that he was capable of more than he appeared to be. Maybe being underestimated was not such a bad thing after all. 3 weeks had passed since Li Juan arrived at the academy. He had learned to eat meals that looked like colored soup and tasted like metal. He had figured out how to use the strange alien bathroom facilities. He had even started to understand some of the musical whistles his roommate used to communicate. But today was different. Today he would learn about the Void Breaker course. The simulation chamber was the size of a small building. Rows of seats surrounded a central platform where cadets would sit during their attempts. Giant screens covered the walls so everyone could watch what happened inside the simulation. The air hummed with electricity from all the computers and machines. Instructor Vexthara stood at the front of the room with another instructor. The new alien was huge, even bigger than the rock-like cadets Juan had seen in the dining hall. His skin looked like the shell of a giant bug, dark green with lines of silver running through it. 4 arms hung at his sides, each one thick enough to crush a human without effort. "Cadets, meet Instructor Mordagus," Vexthara announced. "He designed the Void Breaker course 20 years ago. He will explain what you will face when your time comes." Mordagus stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice sounded like rocks grinding together. "The Void Breaker is not just a test, it is a journey into the darkest parts of warfare. You will command the battle cruiser Eternal Vigilance. Your ship is damaged and alone in enemy space. Your crew is dying from radiation poisoning. Your weapon systems are failing." He pointed to the central platform. "When you sit there, you will feel everything the ship's captain feels. The fear, the responsibility, the weight of every decision. If you choose wrong, thousands of virtual people die. If you choose right, you might save them all. But there is rarely a clearly right choice." A cadet raised her hand. She was one of the crystal-skinned aliens like Vexthara, but younger. "Instructor, what is the main objective of the simulation?" "Survival," Mordagus replied simply. "Get your ship and crew to safety. Everything else is secondary." Another cadet spoke up. This one looked like a walking tree with bark for skin and leaves instead of hair. "What about the enemy forces?" How many ships do they have? That changes with each attempt, Mordegas said. The simulation adapts to your actions. Make aggressive moves and you face more enemies. Try to hide, and they hunt you down. Try to run, and they chase you. The only constant is that you are outnumbered and outgunned. Juan listened carefully. He had been taking notes in a small notebook since the lesson began. Most of the other cadets just listened and nodded. Some looked bored, as if they already knew everything about warfare. Others looked scared. Vexithara noticed his note-taking. Human, why are you writing everything down? Do you not trust your memory? The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Juan. He felt his face get warm but tried to stay calm. I learn better when I write things down, ma'am. It helps me remember details and think about problems differently. Some of the other cadets laughed quietly. The crystal-skinned female smirked. Typical human behavior. They need to write down what we can remember naturally. Silence, Vexthara commanded. Cadet Zinthara, since you seem to know so much about the course, perhaps you can tell us the current record time. The female cadet straightened up. 4 hours and 23 minutes held by Cadet Rixmoller. Correct. And how long did it take you to complete the course? Zinthara hesitated. 5 hours and 12 minutes, ma'am. Which means you are not the one who should be laughing at other methods of preparation, Vexithara said coldly. Mordegas continued the lesson. He explained how the ship's systems worked, how the enemy AI behaved, and what kind of damage the crew would be suffering from. Each detail made the simulation sound more complicated and dangerous. The key to success is quick decision-making, he said. You cannot take time to consider every option. Warriors must act on instinct and experience. Juan raised his hand. Instructor, are we allowed to review the ship's technical manuals before attempting the course? Mordegas tilted his massive head. Technical manuals? Why would you need those? Well, if I understand how all the systems work, I might be able to find solutions that others miss. Maybe there are backup systems or alternate power routes that could help. Several cadets laughed out loud this time. The tree-like alien shook his leafy head. Humans think everything is a puzzle to be solved. This is combat, not a research project. Combat is problem-solving under pressure, Juan replied quietly. At least that's how I see it. Vexthara exchanged a look with Mordegas. There was something in that look that Juan could not quite understand. It might have been amusement or concern. Maybe both. Very well, human, Mordegas said. You may review any technical manuals you wish, but do not expect them to help you when enemy plasma cannons are tearing your ship apart. After class, Juan walked to the Academy library. It was a massive room filled with data terminals and holographic displays. Information from thousands of worlds was stored here. He found a quiet corner and began requesting files about the Eternal Vigilance battlecruiser. The ship was impressive. 3 kilometers long with multiple weapon systems, shield generators, and life support systems. But as Juan read through the specifications, he started to notice something interesting. Many of the systems had connections that were not obvious at first glance. Power could be rerouted in ways that the basic operation manual did not mention. Studying hard, I see. Juan looked up to see a middle-aged human man in a military uniform. His name tag read Dr. Kale Somin, and his rank insignia showed he was some kind of attaché. Dr. Somin, sir, I'm just trying to understand how this battle cruiser works. Kale sat down across from him. Mind if I ask why? Most cadets rely on their training and instincts for the simulation. I guess I'm not like most cadets, Juan said. Back home, whenever I faced a difficult problem, I always tried to understand it completely before attempting a solution. It usually worked better than just guessing. Kale smiled. That's very human of you. Other species tend to approach problems through the lens of their natural abilities. Gornathians use brute force. Zilithians rely on their superior reflexes. Humans use their minds differently. How so? We see systems instead of just challenges. We look for connections that others miss. We ask questions that seem obvious to us but never occur to others. Dr. Soman leaned forward. Let me give you some advice. The instructors here are good beings, but they have their own assumptions about how things should be done. Don't let them discourage you from thinking like a human. That evening, Juan continued reading technical manuals in his dormitory room. His roommate, whose name he had learned was approximately warm wind through trees and musical whistles, watched him with curious eyes. Other cadets had started placing bets on how long Juan would last in the simulation. Most predicted he would request extraction within the first 30 minutes. A few generous souls gave him an hour, but as Juan studied the complex diagrams and system specifications, he began to see patterns that excited him. This was not just a warship. It was a massive puzzle made of interconnected parts, and if there was one thing humans were good at, it was solving puzzles. He just hoped he would get the chance to prove it. 2 months had passed since Juan first learned about the Voidbreaker course. Every day he studied technical manuals and system specifications. He filled 3 notebooks with diagrams and notes. Other cadets called him crazy for spending so much time reading instead of practicing combat moves. Today was his chance to prove them wrong. The simulation chamber was packed with spectators. Word had spread through the academy that the human cadet was going to attempt the Voidbreaker. Most came to watch what they expected would be an entertaining failure. Even some of the instructors had gathered to see the show. Instructor Vexithera stood beside the control console. "Cadet Juan, are you ready to begin?" Juan nodded and walked to the central platform. The chair looked like something from a spaceship with wires and sensors built into the armrests. As soon as he sat down, metal bands closed around his wrists and forehead. The world around him faded away. Suddenly, he was standing on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance. The ship felt real around him. He could smell smoke in the air and feel the floor vibrating under his feet. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. Alarm sounds filled his ears. "Captain, we've lost main power to deck 7 through 12, shouted an officer. She was a blue-skinned alien with 3 eyes. Fear showed clearly on her face. Juan looked around the bridge. Everything matched the technical diagrams he had studied. The control panels, the display screens, even the positions of the crew stations were exactly as described in the manuals. But now they were damaged and sparking with electrical fires. "Status report," Juan said calmly. "Sir, we're deep in Korthak territory," replied another officer. This one looked like a giant lizard wearing a uniform. "Our hyperdrive is destroyed. Life support is failing on multiple decks. We have enemy fighters closing on our position." Through the main view screen, Juan could see small ships approaching fast. Their weapons were already charging up to fire. Most cadets would start giving orders to return fire or raise shields. But Juan had spent 2 months studying every system on this ship. "Engineering, this is the captain," he said into the communication system. "Engineering here, sir. We're barely holding things together down here. I need you to reroute power from the secondary weapon systems to the navigation deflector array. Use the emergency bypass protocols listed in Section 47 of the maintenance manual." There was a pause. "Sir, that's not a standard procedure. Are you sure?" "Do it now," Juan ordered. In the observation room, Instructor Mordegas frowned. "What is he doing? The navigation deflector is not a weapon system." "He's trying to boost sensor range," Dr. Soman said quietly. He had been watching from the back of the room. Smart move for gathering intelligence. The modification worked. Suddenly, the ship's sensors could see much further into space. What they found made Juan smile. The random enemy patrol was actually following a predictable pattern. They were sweeping through this area of space in a search grid, just like the manual said they would. "Helm, calculate a course that takes us between the patrol routes," Juan commanded. "Use minimum power to avoid detection." "Sir, that will take us deeper into enemy territory," the helmsman warned. "Sometimes you have to go through danger to find safety," Juan replied. The ship began moving slowly through space. Enemy fighters passed close by but did not see them. Other cadets watching in the observation room were confused. Why was the human moving toward more enemies instead of fighting? Or running away? 20 minutes into the simulation, Juan encountered his first major crisis. The ship's reactor began overheating. Standard procedure was to shut down non-essential systems and reduce speed. But Juan had noticed something in the technical specifications that other cadets missed. "Engineering, prepare to vent plasma directly from the reactor core," he ordered. "Sir, that's extremely dangerous. If we lose containment, the ship will explode." "Not if we vent it through the damaged torpedo tubes on Deck 8. The plasma will look like weapon fire to enemy sensors, but it will also cool our reactor." Vexathera turned to Mordegas. "Is that actually possible?" Mordegas was reading through technical manuals on his tablet. "According to these specifications, it should work, but no cadet has ever thought to try it." The plasma venting worked perfectly. The reactor cooled down and enemy ships in the area thought they were seeing a battle between two groups of fighters. They rushed toward the false weapon signatures, leaving a clear path for the Eternal Vigilance to escape. 30 minutes in, Juan faced his biggest challenge yet. A massive enemy battleship appeared directly in front of them. It was 10 times larger than the Eternal Vigilance and armed with enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Most cadets would try to fight or surrender at this point, but Juan had been preparing for exactly this situation. "Communications, open a channel to that battleship," he ordered. His bridge crew looked shocked. "Sir, they're the enemy." "Open the channel," Juan repeated. The enemy captain appeared on the view screen. It was a Korthak warrior with red skin and glowing yellow eyes. "Surrender your ship, humans, and we will make your deaths quick." "I have a better idea," Juan said calmly. "My ship is damaged and my crew is dying from radiation. We're not a threat to anyone, but I have information you might want." "What information?" "The location of a Federation supply convoy that will pass through this sector tomorrow. 50 ships carrying weapons and medical supplies." The Korthak captain's eyes brightened with interest. "You would betray your own people?" "My people are dying right now. I need safe passage to a medical facility. In exchange, I'll give you the convoy's route and schedule." In the observation room, several cadets gasped. Cadet Zinthara stood up from her seat. "He's betraying the Federation. That's against every rule of conduct." But Dr. Soman was smiling. "Keep watching." The negotiation continued for several minutes. Juan gave the enemy captain detailed information about the fake convoy. In return, the Korthak ship provided an escort to the edge of their territory. What the enemy did not realize was that Juan had just sent them chasing after a convoy that did not exist. The route information came from an old training exercise he had read about in the Academy archives. By the time they figured out they had been tricked, the Eternal Vigilance would be long gone. 45 minutes into the simulation, Juan's ship reached Federation space. His crew was alive and his mission was complete. But then something unexpected happened. "Captain, we're receiving a priority message from Federation Command," the communications officer announced. "Put it through." "Eternal Vigilance, this is Admiral Chen. We have a refugee convoy under attack in Sector 7. They need immediate assistance. Can you respond?" This was the hidden part of the simulation that most cadets never reached. A moral test disguised as an optional mission. The ship was damaged, and the crew was exhausted. Standard procedure would be to decline and head for the nearest starbase. "Navigation set course for Sector 7, Juan ordered. "Sir, we barely survived the last encounter. We're in no condition to fight." "We're not going there to fight," Juan said with a smile. "We're going to save people." The simulation clock showed 55 minutes when Juan's ship arrived at Sector 7. What he found was a passenger liner under attack by 3 enemy cruisers. Thousands of civilians were trapped on that ship with no way to escape. Instead of engaging the enemy directly, Juan used the same tricks that had gotten him this far. He broadcast false distress signals that made it look like a Federation fleet was approaching. The enemy ships panicked and retreated, leaving the passenger liner safe. At exactly 58 minutes and 37 seconds, the simulation ended. The message "Mission complete, all objectives achieved" flashed across the screen. The observation room fell completely silent. No one moved or spoke for several long moments. Then the silence was broken by the sound of Instructor Mordegas dropping his tablet on the floor. Juan had not just completed the Voidbreaker course in under an hour. He had achieved a perfect score. The silence in the observation room stretched on for what felt like forever. Instructor Vexithera stared at the main display screen where the final score was still showing. Her forearms hung motionless at her sides. Her yellow eyes were wide, with disbelief. Instructor Mordagus was the first to speak. "Run the diagnostics," he said in a voice barely above a whisper. "Sir?" asked the technician operating the simulation controls. "Run full diagnostics on all systems. Check for errors, glitches, anything that could explain what just happened." The technician's fingers moved quickly across the control panel. Data streams flowed across smaller screens as the computer systems checked themselves. After 5 minutes, he looked up with confusion on his face. "All systems operating normally, sir. No errors detected. The simulation ran exactly as designed." Cadet Zinthara jumped up from her seat. "That's impossible. No one completes the course in under an hour. The human must have cheated somehow." Dr. Soman stepped forward from the back of the room. "Cheated how exactly?" "He was monitored by your systems the entire time. Every action he took was recorded and verified." "But he broke every rule of proper military conduct," Zinthara argued. "He negotiated with the enemy. He gave them false information. He avoided direct combat. Those are not the actions of a warrior. Those are the actions of someone trying to save his crew and complete his mission," Dr. Soman replied calmly. Meanwhile, Juan was still sitting in the simulation chair, waiting for the neural connections to fully disconnect. He felt tired but satisfied. The course had been challenging, but it was exactly the kind of problem-solving exercise he enjoyed most. When the restraints finally released him, he stood up and looked around at all the staring faces. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. Vexithara found her voice. "Cadet Juan, report to debriefing room 3 immediately. Instructor Mordagus and I need to review your performance." The debriefing room was small and sterile. Juan sat at one side of a metal table while the two instructors sat across from him. Both looked like they had seen something that challenged everything they believed about the universe. "Explain your strategy," Mordagus said bluntly. "Well, sir, I started by analyzing the ship's condition and the tactical situation. The Eternal Vigilance was damaged but not beyond repair. The enemy forces were following predictable patrol patterns. I used the ship's technical capabilities in ways that maximized our advantages while minimizing direct confrontation." Vexithara leaned forward. "You rerouted power systems in ways that are not taught in any military academy. How did you know those modifications would work?" "I read the technical manuals, ma'am. All of them, including the maintenance guides and engineering specifications. The connections were all documented, just not in the basic operations handbook." "And the negotiation with the Korthak captain?" Mordagus asked. "Psychological warfare, sir. I gave him information he wanted to hear while directing his attention away from my real escape route. The convoy I described was from a training exercise that happened 15 years ago. By the time he discovered the deception, we would be safely away." The WAM. Two instructors looked at each other. There was something in their expressions that Juan could not quite identify. It might have been respect or concern or maybe even fear. "Cadet, do you understand what you have accomplished?" Vexithara asked. "I completed the simulation course, ma'am. Hopefully with a passing grade." Mordagus made a sound that might have been laughter. "A passing grade. Human, you achieved the highest score in the history of this academy. You completed objectives that were designed to be mutually exclusive. You saved your crew, completed your mission, preserved your ship, and rescued civilians. The computer system had to create new categories just to calculate your final score." Juan blinked in surprise. "I just tried to find the best solution to each problem as it came up." "That is exactly what concerns us," Vexithara said quietly. Over the next few hours, word of Juan's achievements spread through the academy like wildfire. Cadets from every species gathered in groups to discuss what they had witnessed. Some were impressed, others were confused, a few were angry. Cadet Rick Smoller, the former record holder, found Juan in the library later that evening. The huge Gornathian cadet towered over him like a walking mountain. His rock-like skin was darker than usual, which Juan had learned meant he was upset. "Human," Rixmoller said in his deep, grinding voice. "Yes, Cadet Rixmoller." "You have brought shame to this academy." Juan looked up from the book he was reading. "How so?" "The Voidbreaker course is meant to test a warrior's courage and fighting spirit. You turned it into a game of tricks and deception. You avoided honorable combat. You lied to enemies instead of defeating them in battle." "I completed the mission and saved lives," Juan replied. "Isn't that what matters?" "Honor matters," Rixmoller growled. "Tradition matters. The way we have always done things matters." Other cadets had gathered around them now. Some nodded in agreement with Rixmoller. Others looked uncertain. Cadet Zinthara stepped forward. "The humans' methods may have worked this time, but what happens when trickery fails? What happens when there is no choice but to fight?" "Then you fight," Juan said simply. "But you fight smart. You use every advantage you can find. You think of solutions that your enemy doesn't expect." "Solutions," spat another cadet. This one looked like a giant bird with metallic feathers. "Everything is a solution to humans, but war is not a puzzle to be solved. It is a test of strength and will." Dr. Somin had been listening from a nearby table. He stood up and walked over to the group. "May I ask you all a question?" The cadets fell silent. Human officers were rare in the galaxy, and Dr. Somin's rank meant he had significant experience. "How many of you have ever been in actual combat?" he asked. Most of the cadets looked uncomfortable. A few raised their hands. "And how many of those battles were won by following traditional tactics and fighting honorably?" The cadets who had raised their hands looked even more uncomfortable. One of them, a scarred veteran from a wolf-like species, spoke up. "In real combat, sir, you use whatever works. Honor is for ceremonies and monuments. Survival is for the living." Dr. Somin nodded. "Exactly." Cadet Juan approached the simulation like a real combat situation. He prioritized mission success and crew survival over abstract concepts of honor and tradition. "But sir," Zinthara protested, "if we abandon our warrior traditions, what separates us from mere civilians?" "Intelligence," Dr. Somin replied. "The ability to adapt, the willingness to find new solutions to old problems." He turned to address the entire group. "Every species in this academy has their own warrior traditions. Gornathians value strength and direct confrontation. Zilithians pride themselves on speed and precision. Korthaks believe in overwhelming force. These traditions served you well when you fought only among yourselves. But now we face threats from across the galaxy. Enemies who don't follow your traditions or respect your codes of honor. They will use any tactic that gives them an advantage. If we limit ourselves to traditional approaches, we will lose." The library had become very quiet. Even the computer terminals seemed to hum more softly. "What Cadet Juan demonstrated today is not the abandonment of warrior values," Dr. Somin continued. "It is the evolution of those values. He showed courage by taking risks others would not take. He showed leadership by thinking beyond conventional solutions. He showed honor by protecting those under his command." Rixmollar's stone features softened slightly. "You believe the humans' methods are superior to our own?" "I believe diversity of thought makes us all stronger," Dr. Somin replied. "Your strength." Cadet Rixmoller combined with Cadet Juan's analytical approach would be nearly unstoppable. The group began to disperse slowly. Some cadets still looked skeptical, but others appeared to be thinking about what they had heard. As Juan packed up his books, Zinthara approached him. "Human, may I ask you something?" "Of course. When you were in the simulation, facing that enemy battleship, were you not afraid?" Juan considered the question. "I was terrified, but being afraid doesn't mean you stop thinking. It means you think faster and look for solutions others might miss." Zinthara was quiet for a moment. Perhaps there is something to be learned from human methods after all. As she walked away, Juan smiled. Maybe his achievement would do more than just break a record. Maybe it would help others see that there were always more possibilities than the ones they had been taught to consider. 3 days had passed since Juan's record-breaking performance. But the academy was still buzzing with arguments and debates. Some cadets wanted to try his methods. Others insisted that traditional training was the only proper way. A few had even requested transfers to academies that did not accept humans. Commander Yulseth had been monitoring the situation from his private office. As the academy director, he rarely interfered with day-to-day training. But what the human cadet had accomplished was forcing him to question 3 centuries of military education. The commander was not like other species. He had no physical body, existing instead as a being of pure energy contained within a sophisticated holographic projection system. His thoughts moved faster than most biological brains, allowing him to process information and make decisions at incredible speeds. Right now, those rapid thoughts were focused on a single troubling question. What if everything they had been teaching was wrong? A soft chime indicated someone was requesting entry to his office. "Enter," he commanded. Instructors Vexathera and Mordagus walked in together. Both looked like they had not slept well in days. The academy's reputation was built on the Voidbreaker course, and a human completing it in under an hour had shaken them both to their core. "Commander," Vexathara began, "we need to discuss the human situation." "Sit," Yulseth replied. His holographic form gestured to chairs in front of his desk. "I assume you have reviewed Cadet Juan's performance multiple times." 17 times, Mordagus said heavily. "We have analyzed every decision he made, every system modification he implemented, every word he spoke during negotiations." "And what have you concluded?" The 2 instructors looked at each other uncomfortably. Finally, Vexthara spoke. "Commander, we believe the human discovered flaws in our simulation that we never knew existed." Yulseth's energy patterns flickered with interest. "Explain." The course was designed to test traditional military responses to crisis situations. Mordagus continued. "We created scenarios that would push cadets to their limits, forcing them to make difficult choices between competing objectives. But the human did not see competing objectives," Vexathera added. "He saw a system of interconnected problems with interconnected solutions. Where we designed impossible choices, he found third options that we never programmed." "Give me an example." Mordagus pulled up a holographic display showing part of the simulation. In Scenario 4, cadets must choose between saving their ship or saving a group of civilian refugees. The power systems are insufficient to do both. Most cadets choose one or the other based on their species' moral priorities. But Cadet Juan found a way to reroute power from non-essential systems that we had not considered essential, Vexathara continued. He shut down recreational facilities, reduced lighting in empty sections, and even temporarily disabled backup life support in areas with no crew. The power savings allowed him to save both the ship and the refugees. Commander Yulseth was quiet for a long moment. "You are telling me that a first-year cadet found solutions that our design team missed?" "Multiple solutions," Mordagus confirmed. "In Scenario 7, when faced with superior enemy forces, most cadets either fight and die gloriously or surrender and face capture. The human negotiated a false surrender, then used the enemy's own communication systems to broadcast misleading information that caused their fleet to scatter. And in Scenario 12, Vexathera added, when the ship's reactor threatened to explode, he found a way to use the explosion itself as a weapon against pursuing enemies while still saving his crew. The most disturbing part, Mordagus said quietly, is that every one of his solutions was technically possible according to the ship's specifications. We just never thought of them." Commander Yulseth's holographic form began pacing back and forth. His energy patterns showed deep concentration. "What you are describing suggests that human cognitive patterns are fundamentally different from other known species." "That is exactly what we believe," Vexthara agreed. "Other species approach problems through the lens of their evolutionary strengths. Gornathians seek direct solutions. Zilithians look for quick, efficient approaches. Korthax prefer overwhelming force. But humans seem to see problems as puzzles to be understood rather than obstacles to be overcome," Mordagus added. "They Look for connections and possibilities that others miss. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. The Academy's main computer system was requesting immediate attention from the commander. "What is it?" Yulseth asked. "Sir, we are experiencing multiple system errors in the simulation database," the computer announced. Cadet Juan's performance has created scoring categories that do not exist in our programming. The system is unable to process several of his achievements. Which achievements? He simultaneously completed objectives marked as mutually exclusive. He achieved perfect scores in categories that were designed to be impossible to perfect. He found 17 different solutions to problems that we had classified as having only 2 possible outcomes. Commander Yulseth stopped pacing. "Show me the scoring breakdown." A holographic display appeared showing Juan's results compared to other cadets. The differences were shocking. Where most cadets scored high in one area and low in others, Juan had achieved near-perfect scores across all categories. "This is unprecedented," Vexathara whispered. "More than unprecedented," Mordegas corrected. "This suggests that our entire understanding of military tactics may be limited by our own cognitive biases." The commander's energy patterns began fluctuating rapidly. "Computer, access the Academy's historical records. I want to see performance data for the top graduates from the past 50 years. Data streams flowed across the displays. The patterns were consistent across all species and time periods. Students excelled in areas that matched their species' natural abilities, but showed predictable weaknesses in areas that did not. Now compare these patterns to Cadet Juan's performance." The comparison was startling. Where every other cadet showed the expected peaks and valleys, Juan's profile was almost flat across all categories. He had not just excelled in areas that matched human strengths. He had found ways to succeed in areas where humans should theoretically be weak. "Commander," Vexathara said slowly, "I believe we need to consider the possibility that human methods of problem-solving represent a new paradigm in military thinking. A paradigm that makes our current training methods obsolete," Mordegas added grimly. Commander Yulseth's holographic form suddenly solidified, becoming more opaque and defined. This was a sign of intense concentration that few beings at the HFY Academy had ever witnessed. "Instructors, I want you to prepare a complete analysis of Cadet Juan's methods. Interview him extensively. Document every technique he used. I want to understand how human minds approach tactical problems." "Yes, sir. But what do we do about the other cadets? Word of the human's achievement is spreading beyond the Academy. Other military institutions are asking questions." "And what? Do we tell the graduating class?" Mordegas asked. "How do we explain that a first-year human has essentially made 4 years of training look inadequate?" Commander Yulseth was quiet for several minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that seemed to make the air itself heavier. "We tell them the truth. We tell them that the galaxy is a larger and more complex place than we realized. We tell them that there is always more to learn, and that the greatest strength of any military force is its ability to adapt and grow." He paused, his energy pattern shifting to a deep blue color that indicated profound determination. "And then we begin the process of rebuilding our curriculum from the ground up. Because if one human cadet can revolutionize 3 centuries of military doctrine in under an hour, then we have clearly been thinking too small." The 2 instructors left the office with their minds spinning. Everything they thought they knew about warfare and strategy was suddenly in question. But perhaps that was not such a bad thing. After all, in a galaxy full of unknown threats and challenges, the ability to think in new ways might be the most valuable weapon of all. 1 month after Juan's record-breaking performance, the Galactic Defense Academy looked very different. The changes were not visible on the outside, but inside the massive station, a quiet revolution was taking place. Commander Yulseth had called an assembly of every cadet, instructor, and administrator in the Academy. The main auditorium was packed with beings from across the galaxy, all waiting to hear what their director had to say about the human who had turned their world upside down. Juan sat in the front row with Dr. Somin beside him. Over the past weeks, he had been interviewed by dozens of military analysts and combat specialists. Everyone wanted to understand how he had accomplished what seemed impossible. The attention made him uncomfortable, but he tried to help however he could. Cadets and instructors, Commander Yulseth began, his holographic form appearing larger and more imposing than usual. We are gathered today to address the changes that will be implemented at this academy beginning next semester. A murmur ran through the crowd. Change was not something the academy embraced easily. 3 centuries of tradition were not abandoned lightly. 4 weeks ago, Cadet Li Huan completed the Voidbreaker simulation in 58 minutes and 37 seconds. This achievement has forced us to examine our assumptions about military training, tactical thinking, and the nature of leadership itself. The commander gestured toward Huan. Cadet, please join me on the stage. Huan felt his face get warm as hundreds of eyes focused on him. He walked slowly to the front of the auditorium and stood beside the commander's holographic projection. Tell them, Commander Yulseth said simply. Huan cleared his throat nervously. I know many of you think I cheated or found some kind of shortcut. But the truth is, I just approached the simulation differently than you were taught to approach it. He looked out at the sea of alien faces. Some looked interested, others appeared skeptical or even hostile. Most of you were trained to see the Voidbreaker as a test of courage, strength, or tactical skill. But I saw it as a problem to be solved. Every system on that ship was designed to work together. Every challenge in the simulation had multiple, possible solutions. I just had to find them. Cadet Rixmoller raised one of his massive stone hands. Human, you avoided direct combat multiple times. How is that honorable warfare? With respect, Cadet Rixmoller, the goal was not to fight honorably. The goal was to save my crew and complete the mission. Sometimes the best way to win a fight is to avoid having it in the first place. Cadet Zinthara stood up. But what happens when avoidance is impossible? What happens when you must fight? Then you fight smart, Huan replied. You use every advantage you can find. You think of possibilities your enemy has not considered. You turn their strengths against them and exploit weaknesses they do not know they have. Dr. Soman rose from his seat and walked to the stage. If I may add something, Commander. Please do, Doctor. What Cadet Huan has demonstrated is not just individual brilliance. He has shown us the power of cognitive diversity. Every species in this galaxy has evolved different ways of thinking and problem-solving. When we combine those different approaches, we become stronger than any single species could be alone. He turned to address the audience directly. Gornathian strength combined with Zilithian speed and human adaptability creates possibilities that none of our species could achieve separately. The same is true for every combination of species in this room. Commander Yulseth's energy patterns shifted to a bright golden color, indicating approval and excitement. Dr. Somin has identified the core principle that will guide our new curriculum. We will not abandon the valuable traditions and strengths of each species. Instead, we will learn to combine them in new ways. Instructor Vexithara stood up from her seat among the faculty. Commander, how do we implement such changes? Our instructors have been teaching the same methods for decades. We learn together, the commander replied. Starting next semester, every tactical course will include mixed species teams. Gornathians will learn human problem-solving techniques. Humans will study Zilithian combat reflexes. Korthax will practice Altarian diplomatic strategies. And the Voidbreaker simulation? Asked Instructor Mordagus. Will be redesigned to encourage creative thinking rather than traditional responses. The goal is not to find the one correct solution, but to find the best solution for each unique situation. The audience was buzzing with conversation now. Some cadets looked excited by the possibilities. Others appeared worried about abandoning familiar methods. A young cadet from a bird-like species raised her wing. Commander, what about species pride? What about honoring our ancestors' warrior traditions? Commander Yulseth's holographic form moved closer to the crowd. Understanding. Other approaches does not mean abandoning your own heritage, it means expanding your heritage. Your ancestors were warriors because they found the best ways to survive and protect their people. We honor them by continuing to find better ways. He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. The galaxy is vast and full of unknown. Dangers. We cannot face those dangers with closed minds or rigid thinking. We need warriors who can adapt, who can find solutions that others cannot imagine, who can turn impossible situations into victories. An older instructor from a reptilian species stood up. Commander, with respect, change is difficult. Many of our cadets come here expecting to learn traditional methods. Their families and governments may not approve of these new approaches. Change is always difficult, the commander agreed. But consider the alternative. If we continue training warriors the same way we have for centuries, what happens when we face an enemy that thinks differently than we do? What happens when traditional tactics fail? He gestured toward Juan again. This human cadet has shown us that there are always more possibilities than we realize. In a single hour, he found solutions that our best minds had not discovered in 300 years of simulation design. Dr. Soman stepped forward. If I may share an observation from human history, on Earth our greatest military victories came not from superior strength or better weapons, but from thinking differently than our enemies expected. We won battles by doing things that seemed impossible or illogical to those who opposed us. Same principle applies here, Commander Yulseth added. By learning to think like other species, we become unpredictable to our enemies. They cannot prepare for tactics they have never encountered. The assembly continued for another hour. Questions were asked and answered. Concerns were raised and addressed. Gradually, the initial resistance began to give way to curiosity and even excitement. Cadet Rixmoller approached Juan after the meeting ended. The huge Gornathian looked less intimidating than he had a month ago. Human, he said in his deep, grinding voice. Yes, Cadet Rixmoller. I would like to request you as a study partner for next semester's advanced tactics course. Juan smiled. I would be honored, but I was hoping you might teach me some Gornathian combat techniques in return. It would be my pleasure. As cadets and instructors filed out of the auditorium, small groups were already forming. Beings who had never spoken to each other before were discussing possibilities for collaboration and learning. Dr. Soman found Juan near the exit. How does it feel to revolutionize military education across the galaxy? Juan looked thoughtful. Honestly, sir, it feels overwhelming. I never expected any of this to happen. I just wanted to solve the problem in front of me. That's exactly why it worked, Dr. Somin replied with a smile. You didn't try to be revolutionary. You just tried to be thorough and creative. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything. 6 months later, the first mixed-species tactical teams graduated from the new program. Their performance in combat simulations exceeded every previous record. More importantly, they had learned to think as a unified force while maintaining their individual strengths. Juan was assigned as a junior instructor, tasked with teaching problem-solving methodologies to senior cadets. His classes were always full, with waiting lists that stretched for months, but he was not the only human making an impact. Word of the Academy's success had spread throughout the Galactic Federation. Other military institutions began requesting human advisors and instructors. Earth, once considered a minor member of the galactic community, suddenly found itself at the center of a military revolution. The changes went beyond just tactics and strategy. The Academy's new approach to learning had created an environment where every species could contribute their unique perspectives. Diplomatic solutions became as valued as military ones. Scientific innovation was encouraged alongside warrior training. Commander Yulseth often reflected on how quickly everything had changed. One human cadet with a notebook full of technical specifications had accomplished what centuries of traditional education could not. He had shown them that diversity of thought was not just valuable, but essential for survival in a complex galaxy. The Void Breaker simulation still existed, but it was no longer the Academy's ultimate test. Instead, it had become a starting point for exploring new possibilities. Cadets were encouraged to find their own solutions, to think beyond established protocols, and to never accept that something was impossible just because it had never been done before. As Juan walked through the Academy corridors one evening,